This is what I mean. I'm going to use miniature logs to build a small cabin. The logs are wooden rods, 30 centimeters long and 8 millimeters in diameter. I will cut a rounded groove along each rod and add cross notches at the ends, so they fit together just like in a real log cabin. First, I'll make a support to hold the rods while rooting. In this strip of wood, I make a slot slightly longer than the logs. Since the straight router bit is 8 millimeters, I've already checked that the rods fit tightly, exactly what I need to keep them from moving. Here's how it looks. The rod sits flush with the surface of the wood strip. I'm using an 8 millimeter round nose router bit. I can now install it on the router table. I've left it protruding just a couple of millimeters, and I have not moved the lateral fence. Now I'll route exactly along the slot I made earlier. The wooden rods will be placed inside so that they can be milled along their entire length. Let's see the result. It turned out really well. Looks like perfect work. Look, here's the miniature log. I turn it and it fits perfectly along the top of the other. Almost as authentic as a real log cabin. I'm repeating this process on all the small logs, and there are quite a few of them. Notice how I'm stacking some off to the side. Those fit a little loosely in the slot and can shift during routing. This is what I mean. If the rod fits loosely in the slot and moves, the routing comes out completely crooked. To fix this, I put some screws next to the slot. The screws spread the wood slightly, tightening the rods so they don't move. Of course, I have to sink the screw heads into the wood so they don't rub against the router table surface. I have already finished milling all the rods. Now I'll sand them a bit to clean them up. An easy step. The cross notches won't be as easy to sand. It is going to be a really nice miniature log cabin. I raised the round nose router bit and aligned the lateral fence with the center of the bit. And I routed this wood strip all the way along. I screwed a wooden block behind it to use as a push block. The rods fit in like this, with their routed area facing down, flush with the base of the wood strip, or they can protrude just a tiny bit, like in this case. I already measured how far from the rod heads I want the cross notches, and of course I had to run plenty of tests, until I got the router bit height that makes a perfect joint between the logs. The first routing stays flat against the surface of the router table. I root in one end, then turn the rods, and root in the other end. The cross routings come out like this. Here we can see them already sanded. Look. The inside surface of the cross routing on one log is perfectly aligned and flush with the surface of the longitudinal routing on the other. This way we'll be able to stack them, forming the log walls and the corners of the house. But I'll still make intermediate walls. I discovered I can put my fingers there. And with that block screwed on top of the push block, I can push this more easily and comfortably. Okay, let's move to the next workstation. These notches need a lot of sanding. Here you see me using sandpaper, although a small round file helped a lot too. The logs are 30 centimeters long, and they protrude 1 centimeter at the corners. These pieces will be exactly half a log in length. I'll place them 12 centimeters from the heads of those logs. I want the inner wall to be 11 centimeters from those log heads. Here I had a problem. If I measure 11 or 12 centimeters there, I have no support to work with the push block. So I'll change the position of the lateral fence and clamp it at both ends. I set it 11 centimeters from the round nose router bit, and I route the notch at that distance on all the miniature logs I need. I also have to route these, but I don't want to route them this way. I'll route a whole rod from one end, then the other, and cut it in half to make two 15-centimeter pieces. This project involves quite a bit of sanding, and the hardest part is sanding all the cross notches. I already set the lateral fence 12 centimeters from the round nose router bit, and I route one end of all the rods I need for 2 of the outer walls. This will be the front porch. We'll see it more clearly once I assemble the miniature cabin. That's why I need to cut these pieces. And also these ones. This way I cut the first piece for one of the walls. Then I use that same cut piece as a template to cut the rest of the pieces for the same wall. I trimmed it a bit because the first cut was crooked. I had to do the same with most of the pieces for the other wall. Now, with all the pieces routed, cut, and sanded, I can finally assemble the miniature log cabin. And how beautiful this little cabin turned out. It still needs a nice wood parquet floor and a roof with solid rafters. Of course, with the same authentic look as the joints between the logs of this miniature house.